today and in the following weeks that would cover different topics about HCI. And we hope that you would find value in our speakers that will be sharing their knowledge towards our topic today. But before we formally start, I would like to introduce first what we do, what is CHI Manila, and what we do, and how can you be part of the community towards flourishing our HCI efforts, HCI research, and how do we also contribute to the knowledge of HCI. So CHI Manila is one of the ACM, we're part of the ACM chapter, and ACM chapter is it's spread across all of the country, all of the globe now. So we're one of the professional or chapter here in the Philippines that is recognized by the ACM. So for those who doesn't know yet what's ACM, you can just like do a Google search and look at what is ACM. No? So we are lucky that we've been given and been recognized as the first professional chapter here in the Philippines. Rationale, so why did we even try to create and apply and be recognized to be one of the HCI chapter or ACM chapter here in the Philippines? We know that there are a lot of local and Filipinos doing HCI work, but only a few are recognized. So we would want to open the opportunity for us to have a community to share knowledge and to also elevate our skills and research to HCI. And we know that the UX industry in the Philippines is a steadily growing discipline. It's already been, you have a lot of communities out there, UX PH, and we would want to also contribute to that growing body of knowledge with the focus of research and its application. And we know at schools, HCI is a vital knowledge area. And aside from that, we need to be prepared in adoption of in-depth HCI curriculum. So we would want to also contribute knowledge on how we can further improve how we teach and improve knowledge sharing with regards to HCI. As for the vision and mission goals of the CHI Manila, so we are an internationally recognized professional and research body in the Philippines, specializing and focusing on human-computer interaction and HCI. As a local chapter, we are also providing venues to enrich discourse on all aspects of like HCI research, as well access to both local and international HCI experts and organizations. So just to share a quick background of who are the officers of CHI Manila, who will be your speakers for today as well. So you have TJ, who is serving as our chair. He's a professor at University of the Philippines, Los Baños. We have Jordan, who is our secretary. We have Brian, who is our membership chair, and me, Ralph, is your acting treasurer. So if you didn't have followed us yet on social media, I would recommend you to follow us so that you get to be notified of our future events. You can join us on Facebook. You can also visit our website, and you can also follow us on Twitter. So I would now head straight immediately to our today's agenda. Our topic is going to cover, and our speakers will definitely be sharing knowledge as to what's the purpose of teaching HCI, and why do we even do research in HCI? What's the impact of this, and what's the contribution of doing research, and why is it important for us to really go in depth into understanding the importance of HCI? Okay? Does it have an impact in our daily lives? How does it even impact the way that we do things? So we're going to explore that, and we're going to get some knowledge out of our speakers for today. And once we finish hearing and listening to our speakers, we will be having a quick discussion on some of the questions. I do appreciate if you can share questions to our panel later. And if you have, just message us on your chat if you have any questions to help the conversation. It's not just a one-way thing between the panels. We would want you to involve also and share your thoughts as to. So, okay. For our first speaker, I would want to call on TJ. So TJ, as mentioned, is an associate professor at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So he has been teaching for almost 15 years and doing research work on HCI. So let's give a round of welcome to TJ. You can press your emojis to have a clap for TJ. TJ, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. Kailangan mo sabihin talagang 15 years, no?
Hindi,
na,
nakita ko sa
na
LinkedIn eh.
naramdaman ko lang na parang shit, ang tanda ko na. Uh, okay, so I'll just share my screen. Oh, dito. I hope you can see my screen. Okay naman. Okay, so I'll be talking about a little bit on the introduction of HCI, what is HCI, what does it mean, and so on and so forth. So hi, my name is TJ Montserrat. You guys can call me TJ, so TJ. Well, TJ na lang kahit na ano, para masaya. So my handle in most usual social media sites is TJ Monsi, so you can reach me through that. And I'm an assistant professor in UPLB. And so let's go directly dun sa first question, what is HCI? And nung nag-start ako sa pag-study and pag-research tungkol sa HCI, one good professor told me about this, that it's really just a study about people and computers. And in actuality, it's either you study directly the people who are using computers, their behaviors, their um, emotions, whatever relationship that they have with between each other and the computers, or you study about the computer side, the interfaces, the systems, the algorithms, the data models, and so on and so forth that benefits the people that are using them. Later on, within my research and study of HCI, I would more likely argue that we would need to add a third part of that um, relationship, which is the task. In essence, it's actually a study about the people who are using computers so that they can do their tasks more efficiently. So either we study the part where we do the tasks, or we again the people or the computers themselves. So in HCI, it often includes these four things. In essence, I have grouped them into these four things where we definitely need some form of problem solving. It's this idea of knowing what the problem is, framing the problem in such a way that we understand it, the people understand it, and then we use our resources, our understanding of whatever we have right now to be able to create a solution out of it. And to be able to understand what the problem or the components of that problem, we need to also study who we are as people, our behaviors, our intricacies, our physiology that determines how we are able to do or finish the task that we need to do. Um, on the third part, we need to also understand and build those interfaces. Now, interfaces is not limited to screen or user interfaces or UIs. It also includes like the interfaces like keyboards, mouse inputs, pen touch, or interfaces like your screen, um, your printer, input output interfaces of your computer. In essence, the whole experience of how you talk or interact with the computer itself to be able to do your tasks. Lastly is the collection and analysis of data. of course, when you are solving a problem, you are solving it in such a way that you either make something more easier, not more easier, more efficient, um, more effective. So you need to be able to back it up with data to prove that your solution is working. So you need to be able to collect and analyze that data, so to either understand the user or the human part, or to prove that your interface is working. So huh? So usually, when it comes to having a research in HCI, you would probably go through this kind of methodology where you frame the problem, and part of that framing of the problem is you do a contextual inquiry of the users involved in that problem. And then you prototype. You either create a high fidelity prototype up until the solution itself, or meaning the production level based solution. And then you design an experiment and do a user test. And lastly is analyze your data. So for framing the problem, usually the goal is understanding the problem from the target user's point of view. So it's not about your understanding of the problem, but of the understanding of the problem of the target user. You need to put yourself in the user's shoes, in essence. You would need interviews, surveys, sometimes master apprentice activities. So these are your usual tools to understand how the user is experiencing their problem as of the moment, or the environment where the problem resides. After that, you would have your prototyping. You create a high-level solution for the user to test. Your tools would be storyboards. You tell the story of a solution in visual form. You have interactive apps sometimes. Create an interactive application using either your slides or prototyping apps. If it needs to have a form of um, interaction with the computer without creating that, um, let's say, without creating that automatic interaction at the moment, if you are just creating your high level solution for the user to experience, you might want to use a Wizard of Oz kind of setup where you make the user feel that user is um, interacting with the computer, but the computer is actually another person at the background. So those are the things that we use for prototyping to be able to um, create and get the solution out there for the user to test. Once that is done, you do an experiment design and test it with your user. The idea is to create a controlled experiment and test it with your target users. The thing here is we want to have proper data to analyze, proper data to say that our solution works. And without a controlled experiment, some of your users might say otherwise, and your data be um, might have confounding variables. That the meaning of confounding variables is that these variables might affect the outcome of the experiment, which could have been controlled. So things to know here is, what is your hypothesis? What is, in essence, what is your claim? Is it better? Is it faster? Is it efficient? And then have a measurement. What are your metrics to say that your solution is faster, efficient, effective, or better? Then you also need to have some form of grouping with your people. Are you designing it within subject or between subject? What it means is, are you designing it in a sense that one person will experience a previous design compared to your new design, or there are two groups of people who will be experiencing, like other one would experience the old design, and the other group will experience the new design. So you need to make sure that everything is in essence designed so that it can be replicable. Other people can replicate your experiment and hopefully arrive at the same results. So ganun yung scientific method na nilalagay natin dito um sa HCI, so that we can see that our work in essence is providing the results that we want. Now, lastly is data analysis, where after gathering your data, how do we make sense out of it? What do we learn? Things to know here is that you need to have some form of statistics, where that is our way of proving that the data works. No, I mean that the solution works based on data, and we need some form of statistics to say that our solution works. The other is thematic coding. Usually, this part is on the qualitative side of things. If we are if we are categorizing what our users have experienced or our systems have been done, this is some form of a way to better understand and categorize the results of our experiment. So yeah, that's the data analysis part. So I go directly to HCI research before the next speaker will discuss more about it, how it applies to their work. Again, going back, it's a study about people, tasks, and computers. And usually, when it comes to papers about the system papers, methodology papers, and so on and so forth, you would need all four of this. You need to frame the problem. You need to create a prototype up until to the contribution of the system, a working system, and then have it tested with a proper experiment, and then analyze the data so that we can learn something from it. As for user behavior kinds of paper or say survey paper, that means you do a categorization of existing research within the field. You just need to frame the problem and then analyze the existing data. So in terms of HCI and its research, it's not about adding a user or adding a method in HCI that makes it HCI research. So it is about learning of what human activity is in there, why that human behaves that way when using computers to do tasks is what makes it an HCI research. It is also about improving computers to suit the needs of the humans when they do tasks. And lastly, it's about understanding how tasks or the process is done in relationship with humans and computers. So for this one, one example that I was asked, sort of an example question that I was asked here is, kapag ba mayroong usability testing, HCI research na ba yun? I would argue na hindi. Kasi especially if you are going to add lang, let's say, SUS, the usual, okay, lagay lang tayo ng SUS, usability testing, and then pwede na siya for HCI research. I would argue na hindi siya agad, lalo na kung wala tayong matututunan that will add dun sa field of the of HCI. If you are claiming something like, kunyari sabihin natin, you are claiming that your system is more efficient in doing these tasks, tapos yung way of evaluating it if it's more efficient is you used a usability testing, it doesn't match yung claim. So you need to make sure that when you are doing yung the part where sa experimental design, especially on the experimental design, if you are going to claim something, you need to back it up properly with a proper measure. So yun yung aking kumbaga parang take away hopefully sa inyo. So there, that's my short introduction to what HCI is, and I would like na to transfer it to the next speaker. Sino ba?
Thank you so much, TJ, for
Thank
guiding
you.
us as to what are the human-computer interaction topics, what are the methodologies and process, and yeah. So thank you so much. We'll if you have any questions, everyone, you guys just message me on chat, and again we'll compile all of those so that during the panel discussion, we will be asking the questions to our speakers for the day. So our next speaker is an associate professor of computer science and informatics in the College of Computer Studies at De La Salle University. And he also co-directs the Center for Complexity and Emerging Technologies, or COMET. He also serves as the Deputy Director of the Dr. Andrew L. Tan Data Science Institute, and his research focuses on the integration of human-computer interaction and complex systems research in developing civic media and technologies that promotes pro-social behavior. So let's welcome our next speaker, Brian Paul Sampson. Hi, Brian.
Hello. Ayan. Sige. So let me just share my screen. Ay, wait. Sound. Ayan. So good afternoon, everyone. So again, welcome to our talk for today. So earlier, PJ shared with us like what human-computer interaction is as a field within computer science. No, so you might be wondering, we're studying humans. Isn't that social sciences, or isn't that psychology, or isn't that cognitive science? Tama. Like, why is it computer science? So I guess to add on to what TJ already mentioned in his talk, human-computer interaction is really at the edge of computer science. So it is trying to borrow different methods and techniques from other fields like ergonomics from engineering, psychology, cognitive science, things like that. And they also borrow theories from them so that we could try to understand how people use the different technologies that we develop for them. And at the same time, so that we could also understand how we could develop new technologies for people. Okay. But then you might also ask yourselves, when we make algorithms, when we make these computers, when we make these softwares, aren't these for people? Tama. When we make algorithms for compressing files, aren't these for people? So what makes human-computer interaction different from the things that we already build in computer science? So as TJ mentioned, human-computer interaction is different because the main focus of our inquiry when we do our experiments, when we do our studies, it's always focused on the human. Okay, we are always interested about the human as opposed to the technology itself. Okay, and sometimes you can also see human-computer interaction as sort of a conscience for the computing field. So all of the ethics movement, yung mga AI ethics na yan, it's all initiated by HCI researchers. Kasi we are more interested about the humans and how people use and how it might affect people in the long run. So yan. So my responsibility for today is to share with you what are the different things that you can build and contribute in the human-computer interaction field. Ano ba yung mga pwede natin gawin? Okay. So for those who are not familiar, so again, I am Brian. Okay, so I am from DLSU, and my research areas are mostly human-computer interaction, and then mixing it with complex systems research in building civic media and technology. Okay. All right. So again, HCI is an amalgamation of different fields. So these are the different fields. So we borrow from design, sociology, ethnography, psychology, engineering, human factors, of course, computer science, okay, into one big field. Okay. And there are different contributions that you can make if you want to go into human-computer interactions. So the first one is empirical. I think that is what TJ mostly talked about, okay, in his session. So he talked about the different methodologies that you can do to actually study how people use technology or use new prototypes. So empirical yon. So one example of an empirical is merely observing. Kunyari mag-field study tayo. Let's observe how people, for example, use navigation applications. Okay, let's observe them, how they use it, what are the different workarounds, what kinds of information do they try to seek in those applications, etc., etc. What kinds of challenges do they experience, yung mga ganun. So that's an example of empirical. If you want a more quantitative approach, because we are from the computer sciences, for example, so you can also study logs, activity logs. Tama? So you can develop parang trackers to parang log every activity that is being done on an application, and then afterwards you try to analyze those different activities. So by classifying them, okay, so that you could fully understand how they use it, ano ba yung order ng pagkakagamit nila ng mga features dun sa application. Okay, so those are examples of empirical kind of work. And then methodological is basically coming up with different methodologies of how to study or how to build new technologies. So ito, we're trying to come up with either a framework, okay, or a series of steps, okay, that we have tried and tested in order to come up with new technologies. And then of course, there's theoretical kind of work. So coming up with new theories on how to understand, okay, people's behavior when it comes to the use of technology. Ano ba yung mga example ng mga theories na available sa atin ngayon? Kunyari yung mga Higgs law, mga Fitts law, if you're familiar with that. So that those are theoretical contributions to human-computer interaction. And then you could also contribute a data set. Okay? So maraming mga researchers. There are a lot of researchers out there that try to build data sets that can be used for maybe machine learning projects. So for example, some research, for example, the lab that I came from when I was doing my PhD, we were collecting a lot of first-person view videos. So we try to attach cameras on our chests, and then mga GoPro cameras yon, and then we just try to record every interaction that the person does, pati yung galaw ng mga kamay, the objects that they interact with, and then after that we try to analyze those videos. And then we can prepare that as a data set that other researchers can also use. Okay. And then of course, there are surveys and opinions. Okay. Surveys naman is you're trying to look at the literature. You try to read everything that has been studied before that is particular to a topic. So for example, si Jordan, he might touch on it later. He did a survey paper, okay, on learning, mga learning technologies. Okay, so maybe he'll talk about that later. Okay. So yon. So kasi pwedeng sobrang bilis ng paglabas ng mga studies. And then we tend to parang overlook a lot of things. Okay. Survey papers, their main goal is to try to ano to? Get all of the recent works about a certain topic, try to analyze, categorize what has been studied, what has not yet been studied, what has been found, what has not yet been understood. Yung mga ganon, are there inconsistencies to the different findings that other people have done? Yung mga ganong klase. So those are usually survey papers. Okay. Okay, so what I will focus more today or tonight, okay, is yung artifact, okay, because this is more interactive. Okay, so yung artifact is basically building prototypes or building either tangible prototype or system prototypes. Okay, so I'll also show examples. Okay, so we mentioned in computer science, okay, we build systems and technologies that become part of people's lives. Okay, and those systems and technologies can come in different forms. So they are what we call computing machines. They could be embedded machines. Okay, so those you see in cockpits, control rooms, okay, or even in your everyday microwave ovens. Okay, so there is also some interaction happening here, even though it doesn't seem like a computer in itself. Right? There are also specialized boxes like your smartphones and your game consoles. Okay, so they're not technically computers that we use every day, but there is computing power in them. Okay, and we do something with it. There are certain tasks that we try to use it for. Okay, and then we also have virtual environments. So unlike the tangible computing machines that we use every day, there are also virtual environments with virtual objects that we can try to interact with. Okay, so you have your virtual and then you have your augmented reality environments. Okay. So as TJ mentioned earlier, when we talk about interfaces, these are not just the graphical user interfaces that we are familiar with. Yung may mga windows, may mga buttons, may mga fields, ganyan. So those are the typical ones, but there are various types of interfaces that we have nowadays. And there could be more types of interfaces that the HCI field can come up with in the future. Okay. So again, we are very much familiar with these three. So the command line, if you are a computer science student or an IT student, you are very familiar with command line interfaces. You type commands, okay? You type values there and then you get a response. Okay? And then you have your graphical UIs, which is an improvement from the command line interfaces. So it allows you to interact directly on certain objects. Okay, there is more visibility, there is feedback, unlike command line interfaces that you don't really know. Okay, all the available commands if you are unfamiliar. Okay, so that's graphical interfaces, and then you also have your multimedia. Okay. Something that you are also familiar with nowadays, especially with the hype going on around the metaverse, which is basically just virtual reality. Pinangalanan lang nila ng bago. So virtual reality creates an illusion of participation in a synthetic environment. Okay, so it allows us to create a totally new environment that we can move around and interact with. Okay, so in order for us to engage in this kind of environments, we have to wear VR headsets and use input devices like joysticks, or if you are using yung Oculus, okay, yung Oculus or yung Quest, may mga peripherals na kailangan mo gamitin para makapag-interact ka mismo dun sa virtual environment. Okay? And there has been a lot of improvements and developments in this space for the past 2 years. Okay? So what it gives us are immersive experiences. Okay, so interaction with virtual objects gives us 360-degree views, and okay, depending on the headset and peripheral that you are using, it also gives us auditory and haptic feedback. Okay, so auditory and haptic feedback somehow completes the experience. Okay, kasi if you're just looking at something in a virtual environment, if you're not receiving any feedback, okay, then you won't know whether you have actually successfully interacted with it or not. Okay. And in virtual environments, you have the option of having a first or a third person viewpoint. Okay. So I guess familiar na tayo with first and third person viewpoints kasi sa mga shooting games, okay, mga FPS na games, minsan nakakapili tayo kung first person or third person tayo, nakikita natin yung mismong character natin. Okay? So that's virtual reality. But then of course, there are many open questions when we try to talk about VR. So one is yung sa VR headsets natin. When we wear our VR headsets, how accurate does it actually track my head movement, head position, head direction? Okay? And how does it deal with motion sickness? If you have tried using VR headsets before for maybe 3 hours or more, you will most likely have motion sickness once you take it off. Parang nadidisorient ka. Once you go back to the real world, minsan mahirap mag-adjust pabalik. Okay, so those are still some open questions when it comes to VR headsets. How do we design VR headsets so that it reduces the motion sickness that we might feel after we take it off? Okay, and then even though there are auditory and haptic feedbacks in these peripherals and headsets, hindi pa rin siya fully, okay, nakapagbibigay. It doesn't give us the full parang immersive experience that we would expect. Okay, so there are still some open questions like how much haptic feedback should we give, okay, users of virtual reality so that they could fully immerse in the environment. And I will show you some examples later on how haptic feedback is being explored nowadays, especially in the field. Okay, and then there's also open questions on input devices, especially on their accuracy and haptics. So yung accuracy kasi you're using parang a joystick or some handheld peripherals. How accurate is its position in the real world compared to the virtual world? Okay, pag pinoint mo ba yan dyan, accurate ba siya? Nakakapag-point talaga. Okay? And then of course, spectator experience, especially when you are playing games. Okay, if you're playing games, minsan nakaka-lonely if you're doing it in VR because you're the only person who can experience it. What about the other people in the room? How will they see and experience what you are experiencing in the virtual world? Okay? So what I will show in the next slide is an example of a shareable virtual reality experience, so spectator experience. So this is a research done in 2019. So the name of the paper is Reverse Cave by Ishii et al. Okay, so I believe they are from Tsukuba University. And this was presented at CHI in 2019. So CHI is the name of the conference. That's the top conference in human-computer interaction. So let me just play this video so that you can see what I'm talking about. So here, they set up mesh, parang doon magpo-project yung mga projectors. So as the user plays through the game in the virtual reality, people in the same room can see what the user is seeing, how they're interacting with the objects. And hindi lang siya dun sa isang parang monitor na usually ganun yung nangyayari. Okay. All right. So that is the research from University of Tsukuba. Okay. Another research that was presented on the same conference on the same year was by Zenner and Kruger. So this is a haptic kind of research. So for this one, they tried to provide haptic feedback. For example, when you are holding, parang may placard ka, okay, or a fan, okay, in the virtual reality, okay, if you try to wave it, there should be some resistance. Tama? There should be some resistance when you try to wave a sword, okay, or a board, okay, if you're holding a board. Okay. And this peripheral that they tried to attach doon sa HTC Vive din yata to na ano eh, na peripheral. Nag-attach sila niyan. Ng parang dalawang fans para ma-simulate yung drag sa hangin, okay, as you try to move your virtual object. Okay? So the one below is what you see in the virtual world. Okay? Wait. Let me just show it again. So yan. So para may haptic feedback yung ginagalaw mo. Okay? So ang pangalan yan is drag on. Okay? Yun yung pangalan ng research. Okay. All right. So aside from virtual reality, another kind of new interface that popped up in recent years is voice UI. So this is different from your chatbots, okay, that you see in Facebook or somewhere else. Okay. Voice UIs, yan yung Siri, Alexa, okay, Google Home. So those are your voice UIs. So what it tries to mimic is it tries to mimic normal conversations with another person. So instead of typing your commands in a chat with a chatbot, you can just say what you want to say, and then the voice UI is supposed to understand and do the task that you want them to do. Okay, with spoken language. So there are different kinds of voice UIs. There are those that still require commands. There are also those that don't really require commands. You can just speak naturally, okay, with voice interfaces. Okay. So sometimes they are proactive. They can detect what is happening around, and then they will try to parang initiate an interaction with the user. Okay. However, there are still some open problems when it comes to voice UIs. So for example, mishearing commands or mishearing words, especially with those with accents. Okay, voice recognition. Because nowadays, I mean, ngayon mas advanced na yung mga language models. But before, voice recognition is still a problem. And there's also an open problem on what if there are multiple people in the room trying to interact at the same time with the voice UI or with your digital assistant. Okay, so what if they all try to talk? Okay, will you be able to recognize or segment or differentiate the different people talking to you and do the tasks accordingly? Okay, and then lastly, security. Okay, so yeah, So, I mean, in this specific comic, okay, this shows you a security problem. So, for example, you just enter a house. If you know that there's an Alexa or a Google Home in the house, and if that specific voice UI is connected to their Amazon with a credit card in their account, then you can just mention to buy this, and this, okay, and then confirm purchase, and then the transaction is done. Okay, so this is just one example of a security concern that may or may not happen in the real world. Okay, so again, this is a comic. Okay, pwedeng nangyayari, pwedeng hindi. Okay, but for us researchers, it is a cause of concern. Okay, so how do we then avoid this from happening? So there are a lot of research and design considerations if you are interested in voice UI. So number one, language models. So in the case of the Philippines, if we want voice UIs to be in every household, okay, that can afford, these kinds of devices, how do we allow them to interact using their mother tongue, for example? Okay, because not everyone speaks Filipino, not everyone speaks English. Okay, so how do we create new language models and then integrate it into these voice UIs? Okay, voice recognition, improving security as we mentioned earlier, multiple users. Okay, natural dialogue. So nowadays you still have to mention a command, or you still have to parang segment your messages, okay, so that you don't overwhelm the voice UI. Okay, oftentimes we adjust to the device rather than the device adjusting for us. Okay, so how do we create voice interfaces that allows for more natural dialogues that can track the context of what we're trying to say, okay, yung mga ganong klase, and still be able to do the task. And then, of course, tone and accents, because even though all of us speak English, there are different varieties of English, okay, depending on where you are in the world. Then, of course, recoverability and repair. So because voice UIs are imperfect technologies, we should, in some ways, allow them to learn from those mistakes. Okay, learn from those mistakes and make repairs so that the next time that the user does the same thing, they already know how to handle it. So that's the concept of recoverability and repair. Okay, so these are active parang areas in voice UI research nowadays. There's also gesture-based interfaces. You're not necessarily touching the screen or whatever. So gesture-based is using hands and arms to interact. So you would commonly see this in surgery rooms because they don't always have clean hands to touch the screens. So in these gesture-based interfaces, you would be using different natural gestures for each activity or context. But of course, there are also open problems on cultural differences. So one gesture in one country may mean a different thing in another country. So creating a general or a universal gesture-based system, okay, is quite impossible or not practical. Hindi naman sa hindi possible. Okay, so hindi siya practical because different countries have different meanings for their gestures. Tama? So for example, we all in the Philippines, if we do this, if we bob our head like this, that's a confirmation or an affirmation. And if we do this with our heads, that's that means no. Tama? But for example, in India, okay, doing this and doing this can mean the same thing. Or maybe doing this can mean something. Okay? So again, based on culture. And then one very complicated problem in gesture-based systems is how can we delineate gestures, especially when the user, okay, just parang do gestures one after the other. Diba? So, paano mo makikeep track kung ano yung gesture na ginagawa and ano yung sequence? Lalo na kung mabilis niya gawin yung interaction. Okay? So, how can we delineate these gestures? Then of course we also have touch-based interfaces. So this example is from our favorite Filipino researcher based in the US, who is in Apple. Okay, si Girard Laput. He's our big fans kami ni Girard Laput. If you are familiar with the hand washing application in your Apple Watch, yung nade-detect niya kung naghuhugas na kayo ng kamay, tapos magsa-start siya ng 20-second timer. If you are familiar with that one, that is developed by the team of Girard Laput using his research from PhD sa CMU. So touch-based interfaces. So
Many
this one,
everyday electromechanical objects emit small amounts during regular operation. Typically, these electromagnetic signals, or EM, are low power and outside the regulated frequency spectrum. They are also distinctive and can be used to classify objects. When a user makes physical contact with such an object, the EM signal propagates through the user. We can detect and classify EM signals in real time, enabling quick and robust detection of when an object is touched and what that object is. We call our approach MSense and have built it into a prototype smartwatch. We explored 5 example contexts and environments. For example, the home. Office. Many everyday electromechanical objects.
Brian, you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay. So basically, with this touch-based interface, with a smartwatch, okay, it can already identify what objects you're touching in the real world. Okay, so you don't have to tell the device anymore what you're touching, and it can provide you different actions depending on what you're touching. Okay, so yun yung touch-based interfaces. And as we mentioned earlier, we also have haptic interfaces. So this example uses motion tracking to actually track where your hands is, so that when you make certain movements, it can do muscle stimulation. So if you see the wires here, it tries to stimulate your muscles so that there's this feeling of weight. Na parang pag hinahawakan mo yung virtual box, sa virtual environment, nasisimulate niya yung bigat ng box na yun. Okay? So this is what this study is doing. So still in virtual reality, and then you also have multimodal interfaces. So it's using different sensors, okay, trying to collect data from different inputs. Okay, so examples of these are exoskeletons. Okay, so these are multimodal interfaces. And then we also have other peculiar interfaces coming out of the field. So meron tayo dito, for example, if you look at the bottom right, image, they attached a peripheral in the VR headset so that, for example, when you enter a forest in the virtual reality, in the virtual environment, it can try to simulate the smell of the forest by parang nagsispray sila sa ilong mo ng smell ng dahon kunwari. Okay? There are also parang peripherals na you put on the side or on your cheek that can simulate parang hot or cold feelings. Yung mga ganon. So in HCI, okay, we are encouraged to come up with new and interesting interfaces. Okay. Sige. There are also shareable interfaces. So this is an example is a smart surface. Okay, so multiple people can use it at the same time. So this is different from a typical tablet wherein only one user can interface with it. Dito, yung mga smart surfaces, multiple people can have their own spaces. Okay, so the open problems here are like, how can we differentiate the personal space of a user and the shared space of all users in the smart surface? And how do we keep track of all the users? Okay. And then we have cross-device interfaces. So nowadays we have a smartphone, a tablet, a laptop, minsan a monitor, a screen. So how do we pass around information between these different devices, especially when we are collaborating with a group, okay, doing the same set of tasks. Okay, so these are cross-device interfaces. And then we also have tangible. So using real-world objects, how do we use these real-world objects to interact with a computer? Okay, so kadalasan gumagamit sila dito ng mga RFID tags to actually track the objects that you're interacting with. For example, itong image sa taas, may mga cubes, and then there are parang icons or symbols on the sides of the cube so that it can detect what you are trying to interact with or what the cube currently is in the system. And then dito naman sa baba, in the image below, this is from MIT Media Labs. So it's using a projector at the top, okay? And then it uses a model of a city that you can touch and interact with. So pag gumalaw ka dyan ng mga building, if you want to relocate a building or build a new building somewhere, it will have some effect on the traffic, for example. So the projection will change. The model will react to the different objects that you add or remove from the parang itong platform na to. Okay? And then this is from Microsoft in Project Zanzibar. So they created a map that can detect the objects that you put on top of. Okay, and then once you put an object on top of it, you can interact with it in the parang application. Okay, you can do things. I will not play it anymore. Okay. Ayan. And then of course, we have augmented reality. You've seen this example before. Nagkatotoo na siya. So augmented reality is basically superimposing digital objects in the real world. Okay. And this example shows how we can take a picture of a real world object and then copy it onto, for example, a Word document. Sige. Sana gumalaw na siya. Ayan. Ayan. Sige. That's another example of augmented reality. So this one is using the Microsoft's HoloLens, if you're familiar. The headset that the girl is wearing, it's HoloLens. And its main use case is in the parang production floor, sa mga manufacturing floor. Okay, sa mga factories, ganyan. So itong pinapakita niya is how can yung mga remote assistance, okay, how can you allow remote assistance to happen while you are doing the thing? Okay. And then of course, augmented reality, this one is another research from Tsukuba University, wherein they created this device that can detect what you're saying, and then parang meron siyang real world closed captioning na ginagawa sa'yo. So as you are speaking, nakikita dun sa screen yung sinasabi mo, and then the person who cannot really hear you, okay, can read what you're trying to say. Okay, so closed captioning device siya. Pero you don't really need a laptop or any other device, okay, or a smart glass, for example, to wear. So I will not play that anymore. Then we have wearables. Okay, so wearables, for example, itong nasa baba, nasa lower right, this is a tattoo. Okay, a tattoo na merong mga how do I explain? When you interact with this tattoo, okay, kaya niyang ma-detect kung ano yung mga, kung saan ka nagta-touch. Okay, so parang yan yung, isipin mo parang yan yung keyboard mo na nakatattoo na siya sa balat mo. Okay, so you can interact with the tattoo to do certain actions with a computer or a smartphone, for example. Okay, so here are some examples of wearable interfaces. And then lastly, you have your brain-computer interfaces. So it's using brain signals, especially for people who cannot use, who do not have motor skills anymore. So the only way that they can interact with the computer is through their brains. Okay, so parang si Stephen Hawking. Pero nakakagalaw pa pala si Stephen Hawking. Kaya pa niyang kontrolin. Okay. This one totally immobilized na yung person, so they just use their brain signals to interact. Okay, but this requires a lot of training as well. Okay, so at the end of the day, what we want to achieve are natural user interfaces. So how can we have a world wherein we don't need these much peripherals and headsets and devices to actually do these interactions with a computer, regardless kung ano mang computer yon, whether it's an embedded computer, a specialized box, or a real computer, okay, or in the virtual reality. Okay, so how do we come up with more natural user interfaces na hindi intrusive, na hindi mabigat suotin, okay, na hindi masyadong maraming wires, okay. So that's the kind of future that we want to achieve in HCI. Okay. But then of course you have the question of which interface to design and build, because you have this question on reliability, social acceptability when you build these interfaces, acceptable ba siya sa lahat ng cultures? And then there's also this concern on privacy, ethics, and location and culture. Okay, and with that, I end my talk. Sorry for taking up so much time.
So much, Brian, no? And later we'll be discussing more and understand more at the Waybang artifacts. You have covered very interesting topics, no? So let's head straight to our next speaker. So our next speaker is a PhD student at the University of Primorska, and he is also an assistant professor at DLSU and director at UXPH. Let's welcome Jordan Deha. Jordan.
Hello.
Ready na ready?
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen now. There we go. Wait lang po. Kinakain ako. There we go. Anyway, everyone can see my screen. This one. Kita ba?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So, anyway, hi everyone. Magandang gabi. Tanghali ngayon dito. So, thank you for the 123 people who showed up. Sana nakikinig pa kayo. Anyway, I'll try to make my presentation as short and as brief as possible. So, but basically, why I'm here is first, TJ gave you an introduction to what HCI is, and then Brian showed you the different types of contributions in HCI. So now they asked me to present my HCI research project. So just so you guys could have an idea of what I'm actually what's an example of an HCI project is. So yeah, yan, ang bobo ko. Sorry, kakagising ko lang. Anyway, so it's nice to see all of you, and it's nice to see some familiar faces. Anyway, moving on. So my name is Jordan. I'm a PhD student at the Hiccup Lab. So sabi nga nila, and then I'm also connected with Comet and UXPH. So yeah, in my presentation today, I'm going to show you why my research project is considered an HCI project. Well, I'm not going to read the outline. You know? Basically, because sabi nga ni TJ kanina, maraming projects doon na parang how do we blur? Do we even need to distinguish kung computer science or HCI or mga ganyan? So, but basically, we'll show you the case study of my PhD project and tell you why it's an HCI project. And then these are the things that I'm going to talk about. I only have 16 slides and probably 1 minute less, so it's going to be faster. Anyway, yeah, so what am I doing? So no, this is not an existential question. So what I want to share is, you know, ano ba yung ginagawa ko? I'm in a computer science PhD program. My supervisor is in an HCI lab, or a human computer interaction lab, and I'm doing an HCI project. So I'm not just building a piano. So I call my project Piano 2.0 kasi merong piano versions na. So, and I think this is one important thing that you need to remember. We're solving a problem that's relevant to a set of users. And more importantly, when users get introduced to technology, newer problems emerge. Diba? So parang dati may classic piano, and then ngayon marami ng features yung piano. So nagkakaroon tayo ng newer problems. And that's, I think, personally what I think makes HCI very nice. Kasi you're trying to solve a problem na technically introduced in the technology. Parang ganun. So TJ introduced na in HCI, there's people, there's technology, and then there's the tasks. So in my scenario, my people are the users of the piano. And then in terms of technology, it's the piano and it's the latest features. And then the task is tatlo yung use cases ko, no? How do we learn with the piano? How do we perform with the piano? And I don't know if there are musicians in the room, how do we improvise with the piano or you in the piano? So yon. So ito yung research problem ko. Sabi kasi nila, when you're gonna do a thesis or a research, you need to have a research problem, okay? And it could be a problem relevant to humans. It could be a problem relevant to technology. So ito yung statement ko. So allow me to read kasi may important part siya. The modern piano has several features and augmentations. However, people still struggle with using them. So we need a design that fits their use case and see if these features don't add any more problems. So yan yung problem, you know. So this is a PhD project. So mukha siyang simple pero malaki yung scope niya. I know there are some students here na nasa methods class. So you need to narrow it down into something very, very small if you guys are, considering or searching for undergraduate thesis topics. Anyway, so ito yung inspiration ko in my solution. So anong tawag dito? Maraming models, maraming theories in HCI na involved and present. And then, kasi when you're doing research, you need to have a good foundation. Bakit natin siya ginagawa? It's also nice that we're doing things that are cool. But then what I learned from my mentors was that you need to do something that we really need. I remember back then, merong visiting professor sa DLSU. Tas parang sabi niya, we can actually build stuff like Jarvis technology stuff, but then do we need it? Or is it the proper way to display it? So sa movie, it looks cool kasi it's a movie. Diba? Yung ginagawa ni Iron Man with Jarvis and that air interface. Diba? But then the question is, do we need it? Or does it solve a certain problem? So maganda if we tackle things from a problem perspective kasi it makes something what you're doing significant. Anyway, ang boring ko. Anyway, so meron tayong mga ICP model, Fitts law, temporal pointing. Ito yung ginawa ko. Parang I did a lot of reading. I did the recent state of the art. And then I wanted to see kung ano ba yung kulang, kung ano pa yung hindi nagagawa. So, yun. So there's Brian mentioned earlier AR VR, which makes everything in an ideal multi-dimensional space. So basically, one part of my thesis, sabihin na lang natin to make it simple, is like understanding Flappy Bird. If you guys know that phenomenal Flappy Bird game, but in 3-dimensional space. And then to make my work relevant, we used it in the piano domain. So, and then maraming inspiration from Guitar Hero and all of that. So anyway, so what I've been doing, so just to show you what I've been doing, parang ano ba meron ang ginagawa natin and all. I did a lot of surveys and reviews. So when we say survey, na mentioned ni Brian earlier, you did a literature scan. You scan the landscape. You try to see ano bang meron. So in my case, I'm trying to understand augmented pianos. Like ano ba, nagawa na ba ito sa piano and all that. And let's just say my journey started from 1,200 papers all the way to, na-narrow down ko siya to 56 papers that were relevant. So I did that and medyo matagal yung journey ko dyan, to be honest. Pero I think it was a very nice experience kasi marami ka talaga matututunan. And then I did a lot of user interviews kasi, I think one important component para masabi mo HCI research yung ginagawa mo is you need to understand your users. So I know there are also some UX people here, okay? And you really need to understand the users and you need to know if they will invest in your technology. And when we say invest, not meaning financially, it's more of will they even consider using it? Does it add value into it and all that? And then, pag nag-gather mo after ko mag-gather yung results ng survey and user interviews, I did what we call thematic analysis. Or sa mga nag-UX, this is what we call yung affinity mapping. Parang ganon. And then I did some grounded theory, ASIAL coding, to understand, to establish na, itong gusto kong gawin is something na nagawa or kailangan siyang gawin in this area. Okay? But I mean, these are the behind the scenes part. I have no photos to show them, but then I also did a lot of prototyping. So basically, I'm trying to build an augmented piano. I'm using Unity and I'm coding in C#. believe me, I hated C# pero kailangan ko talaga mag C# kasi yun yung gumagana sa Unity. And I don't know if you can see my screen. So you can see here a close-up of my piano. And then kita mo yung projector kasi I need to attach the projector from above. So basically yung idea is merong projector na nagpo-project on a white screen na attached sa piano. Okay, and then yung piano nagpe-play siya nung piano roll visualizations. And then now what I want to do is, well, I'm using a MIDI keyboard, a Clavinova. And then ang gusto kong gawin is, gusto ko malaman yung timing ng person. Like, pinrest niya ba to? On time ba to? Tama ba yung pag-release niya? Tama ba yung pag-press niya and hold and everything? And then, ima-match ko siya sa music features. And then from here, basically what I wanted to show was, may mga studies kasi na when we click something, like before we click something, there is a planning mechanism in our brain. So I'm borrowing from psychology. Na, whenever, like if people here play FPS games, yan, you try to aim at something. So minsan nga, diba, hindi mo siya, nahahabol mo yung shot, diba? Parang ganun. So there's a planning mechanism. So what I wanted to do was I want to push it to the next level. So there's a planning mechanism for one target. What if now there's a multiple targets and then you're using your fingers for it? So yan. So I think ito yung exciting part ng research ko. Like na-push akong mag-build ng stuff, which is nice, and I'm thankful na we have the equipment and the facility to work on it. So I built, and then yun nga. So mahirap mag-calibrate and all that stuff. Pero masaya siya kasi nakikita mo na yung ginagawa ko, ito siya nasa harap mo. So there's some tangible output. Okay? So basically ito yung vision ko for my prototype. So there are the certain features. And then the HCI component now is, or the next stage that I need to know is, I will let users use my tool. For learners, did they learn? Did they learn faster? Did they learn better? Did they get overwhelmed? Okay. For performers, does this tool encourage them to improvise or to explore extra musical chords or progressions? Yan. So yun yung gusto kong malaman or gusto kong ma-investigate in my research. So basically, ito yung things na kailangan ko pang gawin kasi gusto malaman ni Brian kung gagraduate na ba ako. So magbe-build ako ng models. So there's some machine learning on that. Okay. And then yung piano roll. So dito ko nagagamit yung Unity and everything. And then yun nga, I need to run user tests, analyze the findings, and statistics. Test them. You need to show statistically or scientifically speaking kung significant ba yung change, significant ba yung effect niya to the users. So if you think na bakit ba ako nag-aaral ng statistics, dito nyo siya magagamit when you're trying to prove something, when you're trying to prove the hypothesis. And then, yeah, and of course, part of the process is to write and publish the results. So hopefully matapos ko siya within the next 6-7 months. Ganun. And yeah, Brian also mentioned something about your intended contributions. So he presented 7 types of contributions, and I think in my PhD, I'm trying to make 4 distinct contributions. So I already did a survey of the existing landscape of piano augmentations. Tapos na siya, nasubmit ko na yung paper, sana matanggap siya in a conference, we'll know in a few months. And then the artifact, yung piano, yung prototype ko. So, and then theoretical is yung pointing model kasi from the data na na-collect ko, we can build a model such as like Fitts law, but for 3-dimensional multi-target spaces. Parang ganun siya. And then, of course, the empirical artifact, the empirical contribution. Like, I want to understand how pianists learn and improvise with my artifact. Parang ganun. So, yan yung intended contributions ko, which I think makes my project an HCI research. So, if you're also doing or if you're thinking of a project or a research, isipin nyo ano yung magiging potential contribution nyo, in what form as well. Maybe that can help. And yeah, moving forward with my HCI research, or basically the things I'll do when I graduate, I want to focus on computational interactions as an expertise. Ano pong ibig sabihin nito? It's now what Brian said earlier. There are many spaces, interfaces, and forms of artifacts. I want to understand how they work in these environments. Like, like for example, yun nga, pag nag-throw ka, nag-move ka in a virtual space, how can you prevent injuries? like alam natin na, oy, ganito ako mag-basketball, ganito ako mag-Wii, kunwari sa Nintendo Wii, diba? But now, if we try to understand their movement or how they move in such spaces, can we also now prevent them from getting injuries, or can we help them be better at it? So kaya, and then yung target thematic areas ko is what we call creative and reflective technologies and spaces. So like kunwari in a concert, how can you make this band perform better but then keeping it natural for them, pero na-augment mo yung light and everything. And yeah, and then ano pa bang gusto ko sabihin? So yun, so I want to also do user proficiency and skills improvement, like how do I help people become better, transition into experts in what they're doing, help them train more. And then yeah, and I want to work on augmented mixed reality and also drones and mobiles, kasi parang ito yata yung missing. So if you're interested in working in these things, we can definitely talk after this. Yeah. So ito pala yung mga pictures ng sa lab namin and what we're doing right now. And yeah, for more details, sorry sabog yung presentation ko. For more details about my research, you can check out my website. It's jordandeha with no vowels.github.io. And yeah, that's my piano project. And thank you for listening. I hope may natutunan kayo.
Hey, thank you so much, Jordan, for sharing a very interesting project. No? And hopefully we can play around with your project kung kaya mo dalhin sa Pilipinas. So,
Pwede siya.
Pwede.
Like kailangan mo lang
Okay.
ng projector.
Got it. Sige, I already placed into the spotlight our speakers, though, since probably I'll just be asking some questions revolving around what we have discussed and covered, and TJ have discussed on what are the methodologies and what are the topics that will be covered when we teach HCI, and covered upon some of the research aspect, and Brian was able to discuss then ano ba yung different types of HCI research, bago learning din sa akin yun, and along with the other artifacts na possible way to build and construct new interfaces and exploring future interfaces. And we have an actual work that really does an artifact work, and it's an artifact also surveys empirical type of like HCI work. So just to set the ground in terms of on your own language, why do you think HCI is important, especially in our field, computer science and technology, and why a specific student or a teacher needs to learn what HCI is all about? Maybe we can start with Brian.
Okay, so for me, I think learning HCI and deepening our knowledge about HCI is important, especially for computer science majors. Mainly because a lot of our training is purely technical. We are trained to be very proficient in building stuff, but we are not trained with the tools in the methods to actually question whether what we are building is right or wrong, whether what we are building really achieves what we intend to achieve. So HCI as a field and as a course within the curriculum gives the tool set to allow us to do all these kinds of inquiry and investigation about the different technologies that we create and maybe other people would create for us. So that's why I think HCI is important in
Thank you so much for that, Brian. TJ, maybe you can add as to on your own definition, why do you think it's important? Again, giving also a perspective as to going out in the school, why do you think HCI is important to people in their career also when they graduate?
For me, when it comes to HCI, why it's important. Personally, it's just fun to solve problems in a way that it's not sort of mathematical in the process, where you need something na the human aspect, or just because I'm more on building things where people can use it. Kasi like if it's just AI, you just need to make sure that the accuracy or precision is compared to other models na ginagawa nyo, na nagawa na is better, or at least for computer image, yung image processing is the same thing. Precision and accuracy is correct, but when it comes to people, the funny part is that people are finicky. Finicky subjects. They what is intuitive the last time may not be intuitive now, especially if they have used to a certain kind of like technology. And kumbaga parang hindi ka mauubusan ng problem, because later on may experience ulit nila yung problem na yon, in essence, because they are using a different kind of interface, and then you'll need to improve it again. So it's like a wellspring of problems just because there's a human counterpart, and you need to find a way to make sure that the humans are able to do their tasks efficiently. The other thing is na kumbaga parang ngayon there are more social problems than computer problems, if you think about it. Like computers in kumbaga parang in comparison lang when it comes to networks, madali yung pag-send ng bytes over the network. Madali lang siya. Increase the bandwidth, that's fine. And then once the social aspect comes in, like how do we measure the number of bytes coming in, making sure that everything is fair for everyone when it comes to bandwidth distribution and so on and so forth, or making sure that no one is hugging the network. Those kinds of things na may human aspect already is something that is interesting na agad eh. So kumbaga parang the other thing that I can think of is yung conversations. So yun. Conversation with chatbots, hindi lang ibig sabihin naiintindihan ka ng chatbot, it's already okay. So you'll need to design conversations now. So yun.
Thanks, CJ, for that. No? Jumping into Jordan, since Jordan, you have taught HCI subjects, and now you're going back to being a student, no, and applying what you learned. What do you think are the important? What do you think are the important frameworks, or like thinking? What do you think was ano yung nakuha mo from teaching that you were able to apply on your current situation? Kasi parang iba yung teaching and then iba yung doing eh, di ba? Parang how are you able to, what do you think what are the things that you have learned upon that specific journey that you think also can help our students here, no, who are joining, because again they're learning these methodologies, they're learning these frameworks, and they will be applying this outside of work, di ba? Or they will be applying it when they go out to really work. So what do you think are very important learnings that you were carrying out right now, no, when you do this?
Ba't ang hirap ng tanong? Hindi, joke lang. Ano ba? I'll try to answer with what I could process now. I think your assumptions are always wrong. I mean, no. Your assumptions can be wrong. So it's always best to go straight to the users. Lalo na kung computer science tayo. Like, interested, I think of something, I want to build it. Nakaka-excite. But then, nakaka-disappoint if you build something and then hindi siya magamit. Like, sayang yung effort. Diba? So that's, I think, one important thing you need to do. You really need to talk to the users or know them, see if the problem exists. So kailangan ng malaking empathy. And yun, ano pa bang kailangan ko matutunan? Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Meaning to do the actual work. Kasi yun nga, kung hindi ikaw yung kakausap ng tao, hindi mo magigets eh. And minsan, ano pa ba? And this sounds so cynical. Sometimes people lie. So you need to know and you need to be able to read between the lines or at least read between the words na, uy, hindi naman sa naglalay siya, maybe hindi lang din niya ma-articulate or hindi niya ma-express. So that's really important. And then yun nga, yung innovation, don't get attached to your product. Magbabago siya along the way, which I think makes it also exciting. Hindi ko alam kung nasagot yun.
Yeah, you're able to answer it, Jordan. Thank you so much. The assumptions really changes depending on the user. Okay, so we have a question here from our audience. Maybe Ryan can answer. No? Since you know that HCI research is what you have discussed, no, and imparted to us, it's kind of overwhelming. So how does one start with HCI research, especially if you are an undergrad?
If you are an undergraduate student and want to venture into HCI research, the easiest that you can do is doing formative studies. So, parang yung ginawa ko sa PhD. The first study that I did for my PhD is a formative study wherein I tried to observe what drivers or how drivers were using navigation applications. Typically, yung mga HCI researches start with a formative study because we are trained to not to assume what or how people use technology. So, formative study yung ginagamit namin to actually come up with a set of research questions that we will try to tackle next. So, yun, I mean, a formative study is something that an undergraduate can easily do kasi you can just deploy parang an application, for example, that can track how another application is being used, or you can do observational studies, field study, ganyan. So there are different ways to observe people, how they do it. So yun, that's the easiest. And then yung ginawa rin ni Jordan, yung survey. So if you want to have a deeper understanding into the field that you want to go into, for example, yung sa kanya, di ba? Then try to read all of the literature and then try to categorize the different findings and methodologies that were tried already, data sets that were used, mga ganon. That's the easiest way of getting into HCI. And then pag sanay na kayo doon, the next step is to go deeper into your question. Yeah, that's my suggestion.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's really helpful. PJ, probably can answer the next question. So I think we were able to discuss a while ago, HCI research methodology. Is the framing the problem confirmation of a problem that you have in mind, or is it like an exploration stage of finding potential problem?
It's for me it's both. Kasi if you already have like a problem in mind na gusto mong isolve, that is where you try to frame it in such a way that is it really a problem for other people? But sometimes within that kind of questioning and exploration, pwede kang makakita ng other problems that are either kumbaga same level of interest, or kumbaga parang interesting din siya, or more interesting with the compared to your first question. So doon pa lang parang you'll have a wellspring of research questions that you can answer or you can ask.
Thank you so much, TJ. Last question. Maybe you can answer this, Jordan. So what role can engineers, specifically IEs, no? I'm assuming industrial engineer play in contributing or supporting HCI research?
Nasa akin na naman yung mahirap na tanong. The joke lang. The joke lang. I'm not an engineer, computer science major ako. But then I'll try my best to answer this. I know industrial engineers are in the process. Ayun, the process of building things. Tsaka may ergonomics yan. So, may mga industrial engineers din na nasa HCI. Pero I guess it's a matter of gusto mo bang mag-contribute in the IE aspect or in the HCI aspect, but I think they go hand in hand. I think IE's own ergonomics, but then my co-panelists can confirm this or can argue. But I mean, at least sa kanila nag-spring yung ergonomics, like what's the proper design of this nunchuck? Dapat ba straight lang siya? Dapat ba may curve siya? So kung gusto natin in the IE, I think doon siya papasok. But then alam ko may mga process models din sila. So when we say process, meaning, ito yung pipeline nitong process na to, ganito mo siyang ginagawa. So ngayon, how can you optimize it? How can you improve it so it saves time? So doon papasok, I think, yung IEs. And then career-wise, alam ko maraming products ngayon, like yung mga products na pinakita ni Brian kanina, alam ko maraming IE or may aspects of industrial engineering doon. So marami ring careers on this. So
Yeah,
yun.
especially if you are going to make tangible interfaces, IEs can really play a big role, especially with the kind of background that they have already. The theories, diba? The methodologies, and the design background that they have in IE can definitely contribute to the success of an HCI research, lalo na kung tangible.
All right. Thank you so much, Jordan, Bri, and TJ. I think last words na lang for our panel, no? As to why do you think they should engage with HCI? Ano pa yung last words niyo? Maybe you can start. Pabalik muna tayo, Jordan. Go ahead. Last word for our attendees today.
I'll try to make it fast. Be curious. Don't be afraid to have crazy ideas. Dito na-challenge ako kasi yung supervisor ko ang taas na standards na. So talagang, minsan akala mo may magaling kang idea, but then, nope! So sabi nga ni Linus Pauling, the best way to have an idea is to have lots of ideas. And you'll get these ideas from the research, the reading, the survey, the interview. So, yon, and be curious. Yeah.
Ayan.
Sinong next?
Brian.
TJ, ikaw.
TJ daw, TJ, go. Go.
Steve.
Yeah, TJ,
okay.
go.
Last word. HCI is exciting. You can meet lots of people as well. Well, lahat naman ng communities, you can meet lots of people within your interest. But in terms of like HCI, it's a weird community kasi ang daming iba't ibang tao, hindi lang computer science yung mamimit mo. May psychologists, may sociologists, and so on and so forth. And you get to learn a lot of things. So yeah, if you want to like join on like research projects or meron kayong mga gustong research projects na interesting, you can just throw it at us to, kumbaga, kung gusto niyo ng kabatuhan ng ideas. And if you want to publish papers, just let us know and baka makatulong kami. Yun lang.
TJ, Brian.
Okay, sige. So HCI, at least in the Philippines, is a very nascent field and quite misunderstood and quite minoritized, especially in CS departments and colleges. So my last word is don't be afraid to jump into HCI because there are many open problems in the Philippines that we can try to solve using HCI research. CS teaches us to optimize things, but not everything that is optimized is good. Okay, CS tells us to create a model out of everything, but not all models will be useful. So HCI as a field is important in the Philippines because it allows us to question everything that we know and do already in CS so that we can do better for our future. So yun, that's my last word for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, TJ, Brian, and Jordan. We learned a lot from you, and we learned about HCI and how can we do research. And hopefully our listeners was able to also learn some of the nuggets of wisdom coming from your speakers. No? Thank you again, everyone. And for next week, we would like to invite you guys to attend. Our topic for next week, scheduled on March 22, it would be a panel on HCI education in the Philippines. So the panel consists of teachers across different universities here in the Philippines teaching HCI. So this will definitely be an interesting topic. And again, as mentioned, if you are not still following our social media sites, please do follow so that you will be updated on our next event. So thank you so much again, everyone. And we hope you have a great evening ahead.
And yeah, and pa-plug na rin if you are interested to join our local community of HCI researchers and of course practitioners din and educators. Please visit the link that I sent in the chat box. There you can sign up and then we'll add you to our mailing list so that you can get updates. And then by default, once you sign up, you will also get updates from ACM because we are an ACM chapter. So you will also get ACM updates about recent researches, okay, from different parts of the globe. So yeah, hope we can see you in our next events.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you everyone. Bye bye.